The City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in the council chambers on Thursday, July 18th, 2024 at 6:20 p.m. for the purpose of discussing an ordinance to amend an ordinance in traffic, Chapter 42, Section 75, relative to resident sticker parking, and an ordinance to amend an ordinance, traffic, Chapter 42, Section 75A, resident sticker parking, temporary October resident permit parking. Notice of this meeting was posted on July 16th, 2024 at 12:19 p.m. Absent from the committee is Councilor Davis. With us from the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilors Prasnewski, Stott, and Jerslow, and Council President Hapworth. And with us from the city staff, we have Dave Kucharski, who is the Director of the Department of Transportation. This is the third meeting on resident parking. And before us, we have changes to the zones, the resident parking zones, the fees related to parking permits and visitor parking permits, and also the streets within the resident parking zones. And we do have some amendments to that based in the Willows. And then we also have the ordinance for the October resident parking, including a visitor pass and the fees related with that. Okay. Director Kucharski, if you would like to join us and present the amendments that you have this week and the information you can provide basically on what we're changing for the visitor permits and the Willows.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll share my screen, start with some of the additional amendments to Section 75. So if you look at page 3 of 21, I had discussions with Councilor Gizzillo to create what I'm calling a seasonal permit. This is something that would be enforced less than 12 months out of the year. In discussions with the councilor, we would be enforcing these permits April 1 to October 31, which would be in conjunction with the metered parking that's adjacent to the eateries, basketball courts, and the park. As a result, in discussions with the councilor, we're proposing that a year-round parking permit would be $10 and good for 1 year. And then in terms of the visitor parking permits, the first one would be $15 and the second one would be at a price of $25. This would impact the following streets, which are also highlighted in this document. I'm happy to scroll to those if you'd like. But they are Bayview Avenue, Beach Avenue, Columbus Avenue, Dustin Street, Fort Ave, Island Ave, and Sutton Ave. And again, they would be enforced from April 1st to October 31st. In terms of just the visitor parking permits in general, we did have some discussions during the last meeting. Based on what I've had discussions with Passport, the visitor pass would simply be a pass that the residents can change at will. So if they have one vehicle registered to a permit and that person then leaves and someone else is coming the next day or the same day, they'll be able to simply go online or go onto their phone, go through the portal, change the plate, or call the parking office, and that change happens instantaneously so that enforcement, when they do come, they'll know that that particular vehicle has been given a visitor permit. So just wanted to clarify that piece of it. In terms of any other changes, I think that covers it unless I miss anything. Apologies if I did.
Okay. So I also want to explain and bring up the fact that this is a new system and there are some hiccups in changing any system, any place, anywhere. There are some hiccups. We did have a woman who came to the last city council meeting and told us that she had a very hard time getting getting her pass, her resident parking permit pass from the traffic office or parking office. She did get it the next day. And if you want to talk a little bit about what happened there, that's fine. If you want to clarify things.
Well, as you said, we're transitioning over from one system to another, so we had to migrate several thousand permits to the new system. There were some hiccups, and some individuals were not necessarily identified properly in the system, but we're working daily with Passport, with the collector's office, with the parking office to address those issues. As you know, we're also migrating all the parking tickets, so we've migrated close to 500,000 tickets that Kelly and Ryan provided to us. So that's another huge effort. It's unpaid and paid tickets. So we'll have all that data in one system that we can look at. So apologies that was happening. We've had some other issues, but we're working to correct them daily, and we'll continue to do so.
So those residents who don't have a smartphone or don't have access to the internet, can you talk about how they go about getting into the system?
So they can come to the parking office or to the annex, the second floor, where some of my staff sit in the transportation department, and we'll work with them just like we did with the older passes to register them through the portal. It'd be the same system if they were coming to get a permit and they needed to have someone sit with them at the computer screens that we have. So it's the same system. People can come in to the offices and they will get assistance. They could also call if they're having trouble at home and they're trying to do it themselves, and we're happy to help people walk through the portal program.
Okay. Let me see. Can you talk a little bit about the data that can be collected during the next year while you're transitioning over to the new system? What you as a department can learn and pass on to us as far as how the system's going, how the visitor passes are working, all that?
So in terms of the visitor permits, we will know when a change is made by the resident. So we'll have a sense of when they put in a certain plate, we'll know when that occurs. We'll also know how long that occurs for until they change it. That doesn't mean that that particular vehicle is utilizing a parking space necessarily. So when we have LPR or handhelds, we have data that's collected during that enforcement period that we can download and look at. It's a robust data set, so we're working on a way where we can extract some of that information. Like, let's say we see a car that had been registered and it's been there more than the 7-day period. We can collect the information to see, did it show up in enforcement more than that or something like that. Give us a sense of whether or not these permits are being abused. I'd say that when we changed the prices from the last time we did it around, we saw that abuse going down. So we're hoping that people will use them as they should, but we do have a way to monitor it.
Right. And just to remind the counselors here, the problem a couple years ago was that there were reports that the visitor passes were being abused, that they were just being used for the whole year by the same person, so that they didn't have to go and buy a permit, or they maybe they didn't have any way to show that they were a resident there, whatever. They weren't using them the proper way. The changes we made were to set a limit of 7 days. The problem with that was that the enforcement is difficult when you're doing it by hand. Am I correct? Like the police or the traffic department would have to go out and note every single day that the car is there. Right. And if they weren't there one day, then that's a gap. So.
Right. And again, that limitation does exist with the current system, but it gives us better tracking ability.
It's easier to do that.
Someone does park, enforcement comes by, perhaps that car leaves after enforcement and then returns, and it could be somewhere else on the street, or perhaps they find the same spot. So there's variabilities, but we're hopeful that with the new data that we're collecting, we'll be able to better track it and maybe identify where abuses might be occurring.
Right. And so that was the genesis of the 7-day limit on the visitor pass, those chunks, the
packets,
46 packets of 7 days was to kind of put some sort of a guideline on and hopefully kind of check that abuse. But now, as it's being implemented, it's just you go in and you change it when you need it. It's there. There's no 7-day
Correct.
packets that you're using.
Correct. We did an attempt to try to address that as best we could, but we understood that came with restrictions, so it wasn't as free to use. So that's why we went and made the change. So
hopefully after a year, we'll be able to look at some of the data, and I understand it's going to be a lot of data. And so hopefully we can get some data analysis in the city to kind of go through all that stuff and understand better how visitor passes are being used by residents in the city, correct? And then we can make a better educated guess on how we want to go forward with it.
correct.
Okay.
In addition, as we spoke last time about healthcare workers and contractors, that will all be now to go into the system, so we get a sense of how many of those permits we are issuing
Right.
throughout a year.
Okay, so again, with the healthcare workers, with the contractors, a resident can allow them to park in their driveway. They can use one of their visitor passes because now it is easily
Correct.
movable and changeable. Or a contractor can get a pass through your office, right?
Correct.
Or a healthcare worker can get kind of a pass to go from person to person to make it a little bit easier on them?
Yes,
correct?
we can do that. And as I said, we would look at it for healthcare workers more on a monthly basis, understanding sort of the nature of the work. And with contractors, it would be more of a weekly check-in. If they're continuing to do work and they need to stay on the site longer, that's something we can communicate with them.
Okay. So we did talk, I think, at the first meeting that it would make sense for one of the counselors to put in an order to kind of come back in either 6 months or a year, probably a year, and get an update on how the system's going, what kind of hiccups you had and got through. But also, I think it would be interesting for the council to know how those healthcare workers are being serviced, I think, how easy it is. Are there any problems there? Are they being abused? I doubt that they would be abusing their permits, but how easy it is, how many permits we have, that sort of thing. And the same with the contractors. I'm sure you're going to be ironing all this stuff out in the next couple of days, but I think, so keeping track of that kind of information too would be good.
Yes, we're looking to do that as well. I think it'll help the program overall.
Okay, great. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just repeat the healthcare workers and contractors process, what that looks like?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I understand that, because I am hung up on the visitor pass difficulty.
So, but before we made the transition on, the residents would provide the visitor hang tag to a visiting nurse or caregiver. But under what we have now, the residents who purchase the visitor permits, they'll be able to register the vehicle for the healthcare workers if they choose. But if that's not possible, they can come down to the parking office or contact the parking office, and we can do it through the back end where we put them into the system. We would just need some information that we gather from them. We do something similar now in October when we do have hospice care workers reaching out to us. So we would ask for some information, what address are you working at, what's the company, things of that, just so we're not handing these out to anyone. And the recommendation that I made is that we'd require residents or their healthcare workers who need this assistance to reach out to us on a monthly basis. So we'd be working with them to try to fill that need of registering their vehicle, but ask that they check in with us monthly. So if one person's coming back for several months, we'll just keep renewing that permit they have. If they're getting someone new, if it changes, we just ask that there's that communication just so we're aware of who's going to be there. For the contracts are.
Is there a way to put that on the healthcare worker or the contractor to do that? I guess I'm constantly picturing my father trying to do this, and I think an enormous amount of frustration to going on a portal, not an option, I don't think. But even the calling weekly, remembering to call weekly, I don't think he's the only person who's in that situation. I think that's probably a lot of people who need healthcare workers, obviously, and a lot of people in our resident only zones. So I feel hung up on the difficulty that we're adding to residents who already are experiencing difficulties. Is it possible to give for if a resident were to have healthcare workers coming, just to give them sort of a card to send to go on and register themselves, so that the resident is not on the resident to do that?
We could certainly work directly with the healthcare provider, or if a company that they work for, that's not an issue. Again, when we do it in October, they're reaching out to us directly. We get some information about. Usually with October, it's just more of a widespread zone, obviously, but we can work with them to find out where are you working, how many days a week, and for how long, and then yes, we can certainly work directly with them to issue them the permit.
Okay.
As opposed to the resident directly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcillo. Yeah, I agree with Councillor President Hepworth. I do believe that if we allow residents to register in person or by phone, that it might be easier, because the resident may not always know the particular plate of the person coming until they're at the property. So I think if they call in, and you ask them what the address is and the resident they're visiting, that in my mind, that should be enough.
Councillor Watson-Pope.
Thanks. I just need to get some clarification, because I think my brain is in knots about this a little bit, because I am in full agreement with Councillor Happer that the visitor parking program, in the way we had previously been discussing it, is absolutely not going to work. So with regards to the way you just described, saying yes, a healthcare worker could come to the city directly and get a pass. Is that pass still connected, though, directly to the resident parking account? So the resident themselves with their car registered and is it still a visitor pass, or is it a different kind of permit now?
Will be like a part-time visitor permit issued to the particular zone in which they're working within. So
and it would not be directly tied, therefore, to the resident?
Correct. But it would still permit them to park in the zone of where the resident is. So if someone lives on Fort Ave,
right,
and the healthcare worker is going to be visiting that, and they want to be able to either park directly on the street. If they can't find it, they could certainly park on another resident permit street in that neighborhood and be registered in the zone.
And it would still be on the app. It would not be anything physical. It would still be all electronically done. And this would be on an ad hoc by request basis. You're not saying this is the new program for healthcare workers and construction workers.
It's not intended to be, because if there are residents who are able to simply assign their own visitor pass to the healthcare worker, they're welcome to do that. If they have a driveway and they want them to use their driveway, they're welcome to do that as well. These are instances where that's not an option, and the healthcare worker will reach out to us or the healthcare worker company, and we can assist with that effort.
Okay, so I'm liking this a little bit better than I was, but I still get a little bit hung up on how that information gets shared with those people. So whether it's, I can't remember, some colleague across the table said maybe a card or gifts, there's just got to be some communication. I think we have a lot of folks who are suffering with, mental health stuff or dementia, forgetfulness. I think anything where we have any kind of burden to remember a comprehensive, invisible process, right? Because it's digital. And we're putting that on the resident is still of concern to me, because I think I think it's just difficult to remember that pattern, that practice. So I think that the plan is a good and sound one. I just think that the barrier to everybody understanding that is still a little high, unless we have a really robust communications plan.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's a new system, and exactly that. There's going to be things that we try to, obviously the healthcare worker thing was something that was brought up in the first meeting. That being said, I actually spoke with a woman that owns a home healthcare service, here in Salem or North Shore. She has over 500 healthcare workers, and they'll communicate with each other via email or whatever. But like I said before, is, a healthcare worker, everybody gets sick, so they call out sick. It's like trying to, putting the onus on the actual resident, which I agree with the other councilors. I feel it's not that it's not fair, but it's just, they're already in a bad situation where they need home health care. So you said prior in the other meetings that you guys work with home health care organizations. Is there a way to reach out to them to let them know, like, if they're coming to Salem, that, their home health care workers have to go on their phone and put down the couple addresses they might be in that day? Is that going to be an option, or is there a way we can communicate with the companies themselves?
So the companies that we've been in touch with in October, we will be reaching out to them and explaining what will need to be done. And we can work with them we would be doing the registration. They would be providing us with the license plate information, and we would be putting it in the back end, knowing that their plates would then be registered in the system for whatever particular zone that they need to be working in.
Okay, and I guess my next question would be, if by chance something got missed and they proved to your office that they were a healthcare worker at that address that day or whatever, is the ticket going to be able to be?
Just like it has been. I mean, there were multiple instances before we changed this where someone was parking on the street. They worked there for whatever reason. If they explained that they were working, we certainly we were sent the ticket. So that's again something that we've done. And again, just a reminder: there's 624 streets in the city. 113 have resident parking right now. That's 18%. So just a perspective, we want to help and work with everyone as much as possible, but there's only certain streets that have this today. So,
Councilor Turslow, and then.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Kachaski, for answering all my emails and phone calls about this. We did talk about a hybrid visitor pass that you could actually still keep the placard and do the online. I'm getting a lot of emails, phone calls, texts from my residents in my ward. Not one good thing about this new system, but I understand. But is there a way we can do a placard, keep the placard? I got it before the deadline and I still have my placard and everybody is jealous of me. The neighbors all do not like this, a lot of elderly neighbors, Derby Street. And also the fees. I have a really hard time raising the fees on the parking. Can they keep it and see what the raised violations that we just voted on, if that would help to offset the new cost of this thing?
So I'll take the first one. As we discussed, that's something I'd have to look into further. The whole purpose is to have this be to remove the physical and make it more just license plate based. I still have to look at that and what that would entail, and someone who registers their vehicle, but then they are also getting a visitor pass. I'm not saying this would happen, but would they register one vehicle and then use the pass for another? So again, that's.
If they got the placard, then they wouldn't be able to get the online, like it's either one or the other.
Right.
The person that gives the ticket still has to get out of the car. They actually can see it as you drive by. It's like a handicap placard. So they're still doing the same enforcement. The enforcement is not changing whatsoever. You can see the stickers from driving by. I gave many parking tickets out in my career, many. So the enforcement's not, and I know there's a lot of enforcement that's not been happening, especially in the metered down the Willows, different areas that we talked about. So I think that if there was better enforcement, then you wouldn't have to raise the fees. There's a lot of stuff towing. I don't know how much the city would make towing cars, but we see many cars under the tow zone and nothing gets towed down there. So they could be making a lot more money that you wouldn't have to raise the fees for the residents. Thank you.
Councilor Hopworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't try to brainstorm how to fix this here, but I guess I would just add that I think that familiarity matters to a lot of residents. Just the plastic placard, having something like that and handing that to somebody, I think is an easy process. It's something that people are used to. I think there's a possibility for something that meets in the middle there. I think if you had on, maybe even on demand for a residents that need it, a placard that maybe has a QR code on it, and you just hand it to the healthcare worker and you say, got to scan this, and it takes them, I assume it would be able to take them through the process of registering their own car, and then they hang it up in the window and give it back to the person when they're done. Or, as Councilor Jerslow said, something where it's a resident can register by default. They're in the system with the online version, but maybe they could opt out of it and go with the placards. But I think we need something where the placard plays a role in this situation, because I think it is easier for our residents and would cause less issues potentially. And then I think that you've addressed this, but we're not able to use potential fines collected as a way to pay for city programs, right? Did we address that by email at some point?
Yes.
I know that's gone back and forth. Okay.
Had reached out to the Department of Revenue and said fines shouldn't be considered when looking at the revenue.
So we would need to, if we're wanting to pay for this, the fees would have to pay for the system, not the potential fines. Is that correct?
Right. And that's where we did estimates to determine, what the fee should be. But as the spreadsheets we've shared, we're still not meeting the full costs of the system. And I'd say that the additional things that are being asked would take more time and possibly funding as well to do. But we can look at it.
Thank you.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. Two things. To mine and Councillor Harvey's point, the fact that we're allowing the healthcare providers to reach out to the city directly, even though I think a card or something might be okay, I think really is a super benefit. When I worked for the city, I was involved in abating fines, and there's not going to be resistance to doing that. I have a lot of resident parking, and I've gotten a lot of pushback about the new system because a lot of people feel that the only way to enforce is for residents to call in if they don't see stickers on the street. And all I've been able to do is interact with them in a way to tell them that that really wasn't a universal enforcement. It didn't really result in comprehensive enforcement. The reason that the council voted to pay for the license plate readers is it's a really good system. When you drive on the Pike or the Tobin Bridge or into New Hampshire, your license plate is read. And we've been assured that this is, it may take some time, but this is a system that will create more random, consistent enforcement. And I think in the end, once the residents see how it plays out, I think it's actually going to benefit residents who have trouble parking on their street because people in our park there who legally have permits.
Okay, Councillor Prozowski.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. Not being a member of the committee, through you to Mr. Kachowski, I'm listening to all this and I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly how this is going to work. And I keep going back to those people that need a lot of care in their homes. And a lot of times that care comes from many different sources. And it's a company that doesn't send the same person every day to their house. They have different employees, different people coming and going. Right now, the way it works is the person comes to the house and gets a placard, goes back, puts it on their car, and comes back into the house and does the service, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, whatever needs that person has to have. But with this new system, the question is, there will be no more placards handed out indiscriminate. People have to register their cars.
That's the intent, yes, that you could do it from a laptop or from a smartphone.
So somebody who is in a condition where it's not easily manageable to use a phone or a laptop, and they need care coming and going out of their house. how are they going to do this? It seems simple that they can just hand out a placard, but with this new system, it seems to be, pretty laborious and confusing and stressful for the people who are going to be needing those services.
So as I noted, we're planning to reach out to those companies that provide it. We're not going to identify everyone. It's going to take some time, but we would be then registering those vehicles in the back end to the offices so that they'll be part of the system. So if someone's not capable of doing it themselves, the parking office, my office will be taking that on.
And in kind of a cousin to that, it's somebody who's having work done on their house. Say somebody's having a kitchen redone. They have a construction company, general contractor. They have plumbers, electricians, people coming and going out of their house. They're going to have to be on top of it every time somebody comes to their house. They're going to have to say, "I have to stop. I have to register you with the parking department," instead of just giving out the parking sticker. It just doesn't seem to be an efficient way of. It's just making people into a more stressful situation. But go ahead. Thank you.
Well, sorry, with the contractors, we have some already examples of sometimes the residents are not giving them their hang tags or letting them park in the driveway if they have a driveway. So they've come to us for permits anyway to park on it, because then we get calls from other residents saying, well, why is this truck parked on the street? Doesn't have anything. So in those instances, we work with the contractors and we give them a physical permit. We would, in this instance, work with them and register their vehicles so that they could work on site and park on site.
So are placards going to be allowed? Still be allowed?
We're trying to move away from that. We're trying to do it based on license plates so that when the enforcement comes down, they would just be reading plates. And then if they go down the street and there's no hits, they'll just keep going to the next street. But now what they do is they walk down every street. They look at is to go down the street. If they have one or two hits, they'll stop, get out, and then issue the ticket. So we have two vehicles now with
but if
this.
someone has a permit hanging on their dashboard, that's not going to count anymore because the permit does not have the vehicles that it's assigned to. It's just a visitor permit.
Correct. We would be moving away from issuing those physical permits as we've been doing. We would be registering the vehicle. The contractor would reach out to the parking office. They would give us their license plate saying, I'm going to be working at this location. The street is designated as resident parking. I'll be here for 2 weeks, and we put them in the system.
Okay, I'll stop there just for now. Try to digest this. Thank you.
And it's going to take, just to clarify, it's going to take until next June to get everyone over to the new system.
That's
because it's a
correct.
rolling registration.
Right. We will be doing a hybrid enforcement system until the end of June next year. And that's on the FAQ that we put on the city's website.
Right. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. It's two questions. One, getting back to what, what Councilor President was just talking about. I get that, we have the license plate reader, but if the residents were allowed a placket and just by chance they had a contractor, it might even be an emergency call, and they came over to work and they gave them the placket. If you drove by and you got a hit and that plate wasn't registered, then they would have to get out and give it a ticket anyways. But at that point, they'd be able to see a placket in the window saying that, that resident gave them the placket because they're working at that piece of that property. I don't see why that would be an issue in respect to that. And the other was, as Councilor Jerislo was mentioning, the fees. To the best of my knowledge, and I've spoken with a couple different people, as far as the DOR is concerned, that's a matter of opinion from the DOR as far as the fees being allocated to the program itself. That being said, I understand the reasoning behind that, and it's because the fees aren't a guaranteed generated cost. But isn't there a way that we could say, take a 3-year average and say, okay, well, then this is the amount of money we should be able to apply to the program because we took a 3-year average or any type of average instead of, I understand it's, it varies. It could be, just for odd numbers, 100,000 this year, it could be 75,000 next year, and then the following year it could be 80,000. But if we took an average of that, I mean, that's better than not applying any of the fines to this program, in my opinion, because there is nothing stating the fact that we can't do it. It's just a matter of opinion from the Department of Revenue is what it comes down to. Thank you.
Counselor Cohen, did you have no, Counselor Gerselo?
Thank you, Chair. Just one other question when we were talking on the phone about the enforcement. I know most times people call on weekends if they see a strange car parked in. So now you said that you can still call the police department. Will the desk personnel have access to the computer? Or is it just somebody in the cruiser with a plate reader be able to access that information?
So I've been discussing with Lieutenant Tucker and with the chief about how police can integrate their cruisers that currently have LPR so that they can do the same type of enforcement as parking. Also having handhelds and printers, but also being access to the portal where someone were to call them, say at 10 o'clock at night, they could look, if the resident gives the police the plate number, they can look and say, yes, that is in the system. Rather than bring a cruiser out physically,
Yeah. So
they could look at it. Correct.
Desk personnel. Okay. Thank
I'm
you.
working with them on that.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, what are the hours that your department would be enforcing resident zones?
Parking enforcement is Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Sundays from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions at this point or comments? Okay, I am going to, at this point, move to public comment, and then we can discuss further if there's any amendments that need to be made. Okay, I do want to, before we start, I do want to read one into the record that came in writing. It says, to whom it may concern, Salem City Council Committee. This one says of the whole, but it's the OLA committee. I am sorry I cannot attend the 18 July 2024 meeting due to a prior engagement. I am disappointed the city moved to a digital app for parking as it is elitist and short-sighted given the numerous glitches. I am not in support of the city increasing any parking related fees given our high taxes. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And this is from Mary Beth Bainbridge on Prescott Street. Okay, so if there's anyone in the room that would like to make public comment, you can come on up to the mic.
I think so. Oh. Steve Kapanis, 23 Wisteria Street. Typically, I don't read comments. However, I wanted to make sure that I made sure all of my points were made. May look like I have a lot here, but trust me, it's in a large print, and I'm going to have to use my glasses. So if I'm not looking up at any of you, it's not out of disrespect. Last couple of OLA meetings, members of OLA and other councilors have explained the need for additional parking enforcement and more efficient enforcement. The consensus from this committee was that residents were not readily finding parking in their neighborhood. In general terms, it would be fair to summarize your position as the residents are not receiving the intended service of parking and that ticketing would provide that service. I have 4 or 5 other points. First, the assertion that the DOR has made a determination that fines from enforcements shouldn't be included is inaccurate. It's not even close to what was in the email. First, before we go over exactly what was said in the email, you've received half of the communication. You don't know what question was asked of the DOR. You don't know how it was prefaced. You don't know what criteria was put on it. It was never memorialized in writing. You have a response to some question that was asked over the phone. I have contacted the DOR. I think all of you received the email from the chief counsel of the DOR. He's looking into the matter and will respond by the end of the month. So how can you make a decision now when you know the DOR is relooking at what was said? But let's look at exactly what was said. Sorry. The quote from the DOR in the email. Ultimately, ticketing the non-permit offenders shouldn't be considered as somehow supporting a service to the permit holders. You've argued for 2 meetings. For 2 meetings, many of you have spoke and said that ticketing does support this service. That fact alone, that revenue must be included. And I'm sure that's what the deal will come back. All right, technical difficulty. Second, the assertion that the LPR system and licensing fees are an additional cost to the city is false, absolutely false. The LPR system has an ROI, return of interest of 0.7 years. The LPR system will not only pay for itself in 8.5 months, that first year it will generate an additional $30,000 in income and $130,000 in income in every subsequent year. Why was that data not presented to this board? Why did somebody have to ask for that and then email it to this board? It's not a cost. It's a revenue generating machine. Third, estimates of parking enforcement salaries included can only be best described as penciled whip at best. There are no assumptions listed in the method used to calculate the estimates. More importantly, data is collected on the parking tickets. Things like dates, times, location, employee, type of fine giving. Why can't we get this data? We've been asking for it for over 2 years. The parking department is either refusing to provide it or they don't have the capability. Both are problems. Third, sorry, I think I just read the third. Fourth, multiple members of public have been asking for this information. Why can't we get it? We even narrowed our scope of what we were asking for. A simple question was asked. We'd like to know how many resident parking violations were issued by month for 2.5 years and how much those tickets had for revenue. They can't provide that data. They provide ranges. Well, it's somewhere between 100 and 120,000 a year. This department handles millions of dollars. Why can't we get an accurate response from them? Fifth, the actions by the parking department to over-exaggerate the cost of resident parking can only be explained by their overzealous attempt to increase fees to residents to keep the revenue within their own department. I make this statement based on the fact that the director tried to include the cost of snow plowing and road maintenance when we first asked this question. Ridiculous. Second, his comments when answering a question at the first OLA meeting. If I'm wrong on who asked the question, I apologize, but I believe it was Ward 4 Councilor Harvey who asked the direct question. Can't we use the fines from parking? After an awkward moment of silence, his response, well, it doesn't matter because that just goes to the general fund. In other words, that means my department lose money. I don't get it. He's obviously conflicted. In closing, parking enforcement is not only an integral part of resident parking program, but the sole purpose of enforcement is to ensure that residents achieve the service of having parking available. Therefore, the fines collected make resident parking itself sufficient. There's enough funds collected to pay for it. I can't wait for the DOR to respond. As far as the parking department not providing accurate estimations, not providing data on tickets issued, not providing revenue for resident parking, over-exaggerating the costs, and publicly acknowledging that their concerns is about bringing revenue to their department are deeply concerning. I would ask that the parking department have a third-party audit that evaluates their record keeping and their financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone in Zoom land who would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function. Phone number ending in 398. I'm allowing you to talk. If you can unmute and you, hold on a minute. Okay. Go ahead.
Justin Whittier, 10 River Street.
Okay.
So I just want to associate myself with the remarks from Steve Kapantis. I agree with everything he said. I appreciate the things that have been said tonight about the physical stickers and placards. These are very important for people seniors and other people who are not adept at navigating the online system. My next door neighbor across the street was in the chambers last week, and so you saw her. And so firsthand experience of somebody who is not able to navigate this system, and there are no doubt are thousands like her who will likewise experience the same kind of problems and would likewise benefit from physical stickers and passes. And when it comes to caregivers and contractors who come from other towns, have other primary languages, etc., we really need to maintain that ability for these people. In terms of specifically of the fee increase considerations tonight, I want to reiterate that the spreadsheet that's been offered, giving financial considerations here, there's a number of questions on there, not least of which, as I believe Steve Kapantis has pointed to before, is in terms of staff time for the month of October. That seems to be a miscalculation based on annual salaries as opposed to the month of October. If you look into that, I think that you will find that that's the case. That's rather small ball in the big picture, but I think it's representative of some of the larger questions here. But the main point is, again, the question of expenditures on traffic enforcement, tickets and ticket fines, and revenues. So if we're being told that we can't include the revenues from tickets, clearly we can't include the expenditures which go into collecting those tickets. That would seem to be just basic accounting. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think to most people in Salem, that you would include the cost of issuing tickets, for example, but you can't include the revenue from those tickets. So I hope the council will sort through that and clarify that. And only then, when you have a clear picture based on the financial picture based on that, can you then reasonably decide whether and how much resident fees should be increased in order to cover these costs. That seems like a basic first step, and I hope and I trust that you will do that. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing none. Oh, spoke too soon. Jen B., you can unmute.
Hi, I'm Jen Bierenbach on West Terrace, and I have a question. If this program is already being implemented with all the concerns that people are having to date, if it's determined that this is just not going to be a good idea for Salem, can we opt out of it? And if we can, when? And how much would it cost to opt out instead of rolling with the program? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's anyone else who would like to speak, you can raise your hand. Seeing none. Okay. Where do we stand? Counselor Cohen.
I have a few comments, and then when we're done, I have 3 amendments. A couple of things. I find it hard to associate the cost of tickets versus the assignment of funds, because the people who issue the tickets are employed by specific departments, police, transportation, whatever. And, you know, as all of us know, when we get to budget season, we're looking at a budget in its totality and how we're going to pay for teachers and everything else. Second, I'm not very technical, but I'm anxious to move as quick as we can to the digital process. However, I do understand why people have concerns about, you know, can we have placards for specific things that we didn't anticipate? I do feel like the transportation department is evolving and accommodating some of the concerns. For example, allowing contractors and healthcare providers to register without the resident being involved. To Council Watson-Felt's point that some people may not be able to do it from their home. I don't have anything quantitative to support this, but my view is that with better, consistent enforcement, the enforcement that existed 2 years ago was sporadic, and it was really based on a few really diligent residents or a lot of diligent residents making phone calls. We are going to have consistent and random enforcement, and I don't have anything to base this on, but I think as the enforcement improves, there will be less fines over time. I just think that's the nature of how processes like these work. And I want to end my comments by saying that we kind of gloss over this 18% statistic. The burden of processing resident parking in Salem, and there's a lot that goes into it. I've had a couple of streets where the transportation department has sent out surveys, given options to the residents, whatever. There's a lot of work done that's not calculated in this mix, but 82% of Salem is paying for a program that benefits 18% of the city. And so there's a lot of property owners who are paying taxes who, in the end, whether we lose 180,000 or 200,000 or 10 million or whatever, the burden of anything that we're losing is falling on a lot of people who do not have resident parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is kind of, I don't know. The ordinance that's in front of us right now, I have no problem with the program itself and trying to break out get all the glitches and stuff out of the program. But is there a reason why all the fee hikes are in the same ordinance? Why couldn't we separate that as a different ordinance like we did with the actual parking violations? It came in as a separate ordinance by itself, whereas this seems like it's just jammed into this whole the whole system. It's almost like, okay, some of us agree with the system, but don't agree with the fee hikes. So if we want to vote on agreeing with the system, we also have to vote on agreeing with the fee hikes. It just doesn't seem.
Okay, so the reason why it was done was because all of the changes were in the same ordinance. I will remind all of the counselors that you can make amendments. We can not have any fee increases. We can do any number between the current price and the one in the ordinance. We can stick with the ordinance. We can raise the amount in the ordinance. That's what our job is right here. Okay, so I appreciate the zones, the parking zones. I think we're all in We're all good with the different zones that are created, so don't think we need to worry about that. And the list of affected streets in the back, we're all good with that. So really what we're talking about is the fees, because that's the only other piece that we have in front of us. So, you know, I think this is where the discussion happens. Like, what do we want to do with the fees? At this point, I'm a little bit flexible. I know the next year is going to be rough. And I also know that they don't want to make their life any harder than it already is, because it is a lot of work to enforce parking. It's just a lot, even with this new system. Even during this next year, getting upgrading every single person who's using resident parking, taking care of the new requests that come in. It's a lot. It's going to be a learning curve. If there's issues with the use of the visitor passes in the digital format by anyone, you know, we are seeing this year that it's a hybrid method. I mean, there are ways that they can adjust the policy, but the policy isn't in here, right? That's their job to figure out and make work for them. But what we have is just the fees for the resident parking, the first visitor pass and the second visitor pass. I think that it's important, and this discussion was important for Mr. Kucharski and for the department to understand all the different issues, including the healthcare workers and making sure that they're not paying, which is important in my mind, and how everyone goes about doing it, because these are public meetings. So I will entertain motions or comments. Councillor Cohen.
One of my amendments was about fees, but I'm going to put that off for now and make two amendments that I'm hoping that the OLA committee will accept, because as you stated, Chair, they are things that we kind of all agree on. So my first amendment is that we add to the blue zone, Bayview, Beach, Columbus, Dustin, Fort, Island, and Sutton, because that's in the yellow.
So those are the new amendments that came in tonight. And so you mean to add them as the partial year? Okay. So that is a motion to accept those amendments on the streets in the Willows to change them from year-round to 7 months, April to the end of October.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Watson-Felt. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. My next amendment is that the Transportation Department presents a review of the process of what has transpired after 6 months, and then from that point on, every year annually.
Okay, the motion is to have the Department of Transportation report back to the City Council yearly, 6 months.
The first time in 6 months.
6 months.
And then after that,
And then yearly.
annually.
So under discussion first, I think it's cleaner if that comes in as a separate order at the City Council meeting, because then it is a standalone order that can be tracked by the clerk's office. That's the way we've done the housing one in the past, so that it's not tied to the ordinance, because it's not part of the ordinance. It's a standing order.
Okay, I'll withdraw that. Is that something you want me to do, or you want to do as?
Anyone, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Somebody will do it. Yeah. Do you have anything else?
Well, I was going to make a motion about fees, but I think we should continue our discussion about it based on Councillor Harvey in your discussion.
Does anyone have any suggestions on the fees? Does anyone have a problem with changing? What do we want to do here? Councillor Presnowski.
Not being part of the committee, I think, thank you, Chair Marcello. I think the public raises their eyebrows when we're talking about raising fees. We have this new technology that's supposed to streamline things and be more efficient and more cost effective, yet we're raising fees. And I don't think that sits well with anybody. Not only that, but a lot of the additional changes that people are going to have to go through to make this work. And in the long run, you're right. This may be something that's good for the city, but I think an important piece of the fact is that we don't know where the money is going to go. I think we're still waiting from answers from the DOR exactly how this money can be spent. This money that's being that we're going to be getting from this new system, what exactly we can do with that money. And I think that makes a big difference in what we're going to do with our fees. So I think that we should just talk about the fees at a different time and just wait for some more information. And hopefully, Mr. Capanis's point, we'll have some answers from them soon. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Hepworth.
I think I would generally like to support what my colleague, the at-large councilor, just said. I think that I don't know if we get rid of the fee increase completely or what the will of the body is there, but I think there is room to be made for people who, for just this new system, everything everyone's going to have to go through, ensuring that it works right, proving that it works right, and doing all this at the same time, I think, is a difficult pill to swallow for the entire community. I will accept what the Ward 5 councilor said, that we don't want the entire city paying for resident-only parking and subsidizing it. I think that has been a policy of this administration. I've appreciated that. But I think doing all this at the same time, there is room to do this in a more gradual fashion, and to just make sure the system proves itself out. So whether it's the will of the body not to raise these or to raise these in a less drastic way, I think that is something that I would support when it comes to full council.
Councilor Gerslow.
Thank you, Chair, not being a member of the committee. I find it really hard to put more fees on the residents after you all voted for a private business for a big tax break in the restaurant next door. So I find it very hard, and I've gotten a lot of different emails from the residents stating such as that a private business is getting a big tax break, and here we are again giving it to the residents and raising their fees. So you have to definitely consider that. Thank you.
Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd actually like to make the motion to remove Section D from the ordinance and bring it up as a separate matter.
Remove Section D?
Without,
What? Go ahead.
not remove it, but just bring up Section D as a separate matter. Remove it to, keep it in committee and bring it up as a separate matter. You take it out of this. If I'm saying it right.
Okay, we could do that, or we could just pass this with the existing fees. Like, I just want to keep this clean. So your intention there is to not raise the fees. Is that what your intention is?
At this time, until we get further data, basically saying, okay, we have to do it because we're not getting this.
Right. So the question is, how long would it take to get that data? And does it make sense to hold this in committee or to wait until next year and pull it in again with fees? That's what I mean.
That makes more sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to get an answer on the data within the next 6 months. That's the end of the year.
Okay.
So, right? Does that, Councilor Watson-Felt? Okay. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councilor Harvey. I think if we leave it in committee, we're sending a message to the residents that we're in limbo and they might be paying a fee and they may not. And right now there's a lot of confusion. So I think that you should either make a motion to keep the fees as the chair said, or not, but I don't think leaving it in committee is going to send the right message to the public.
Yeah, and from my point of view, I came into this meeting saying it is an expensive program. Resident parking is an expensive program. It's 19% of the city. The rest of us are picking up money on this, picking up the cost of it. So we don't move forward with the $20 permit. Maybe we look at a $10 permit, and then the Willows for the partial would be a $5 permit. And then we can talk about how much the 2 visitor passes are. I will say, you know, this gets into the philosophy of what is resident parking, right? And one of the problems we've had is people, you know, you get a permit for every driver, every car in your household, and then you get 2 visitor passes too. Like, that's a lot when you're trying to control parking on your street. And so the reason why the prices are higher for visitor parking is an attempt to not sell all of these visitor permits, to be completely honest with you. It's a lot. So I just want to throw that out there too. I think that we don't charge a lot for parking. Even the $20 is not excessive in my mind, but I know that the next year is going to be a transition year. There's going to be a lot of hurdles to go on, to jump through, a lot of people to get on board and to train and to learn about how to use the system and how to log their visitors on, how to handle the home health care workers. So maybe it doesn't make sense to do the $20 jump this year. Maybe it's 10, or maybe we just keep the fees the way they are. So that's where my head is at. I think it makes sense not to go with the full increase this year, just because it's going to be a learning year. And there's going to be a lot of questions, and there's going to be a lot of things to iron out. Councillor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to support, I think, the spirit of what I'm hearing most of us say, which is, you know, I heard Councillor Hapworth say there's a good reason and probably a willingness to give this program space and time. This is a relatively dramatic experience-based change, and a financial change on top of that is adding additional confusion, concern, anxiety, stress, and frankly, dissatisfaction with a program that is brand new and not fully tested yet. So I think that's part of why I think Conrad Brasniewski shared that idea. I know we've heard it from Councillor Driscoll. And I think that what my colleague from Ward 4 was suggesting was to do exactly what you just said, which is to there are so many substantive changes in this, and we want to pass most of them, but this fee conversation still needs to take place. Now, I agree with you as well, Councillor Chair Marcello, that this is the work, and to not pass something tonight would be continue an ongoing conversation where, if we're looking for data, we don't have it yet. But I think that there's a number of things, you know, just having re-looked back over this again this evening, that we could probably gain some agreement on in conversation. So I'm going to propose that we take each one of these in the section D, and we're just going to work through it. And I think if there's general agreement that we do not want to change the resident permit fee, you know, to 20, we can leave that as is. We can leave the others. I think we should accept the insert of the resident permit parking for the I'm trying to just read through this here. We want to make sure the partial is in here, right? That the part-time resident fee structure is in here. So we should take that one up. And we should also take up the non-resident landlord, because that's also a new addition. And we can maybe say, let's not, you know, add this additional burden to the resident and visitor parking specifically year round, but let's take up these other issues and take some action on them tonight. What does the body feel about that?
What is your motion? To keep the...
I have not made a motion. This is simply a comment.
Your idea to keep the resident permit fee?
No, I'm saying let's walk through it. Let's walk through it one at a time, because these are offered to us as amendments tonight, and we can either vote yes or no on them. Okay.
Do you want to start?
Darn. Looks like we've got some comments.
Oh.
Yeah, but I'm happy to.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. I was just going to kick off that conversation and start out with the comment that change is hard, understanding that, but I think we are on the right path. and giving grace to the department and the new policy and having the faith that they've been able to work through issues in the past and they will again. Specifically to fees, I think this is the deal of the century, $5 for 200 square feet of personal property storage year round. I definitely think that needs to be increased. I am not 100% sure as to what that fee should be. I'm okay if, $20 is drastic, but we've seen a lot of this in front of us where the fee has been consistently low for many years, and then we have to jump it up high. Again, though, this is a tough conversation that we're having. And if we want to be incremental with that, that's fine. But I definitely think if it doesn't come out of the committee with it being raised, I would like it to be at least to the full council for a vote as to what that fee should be. Perhaps we'll have some more information when we have a full council meeting again as well. But I do not think $5 is appropriate. I don't think $10 is appropriate for a visitor parking fee. Personal property storage for 18%. I almost said 18 streets, but it's not 18%. For 18% of the city is a burden that is placed on residents that do not have the luxury of that.
Councillor Watson-Belt.
Thank you, Councillor Marcello. I say we take these up one at a time. I'm going to motion that we accept the first edit in the fees, section D, which is permit from sticker. I'm going to motion. Do you want to vote on each one at a time?
Well, we can do the fees one at a time.
Okay.
Permit to sticker is fine, whatever.
Haven't voted on what?
Understood, but there's a whole lot of other, we can vote on the whole thing once we can kind of figure out what the fees are going to be. I mean, all of these pages are edits, so.
I would vote, yeah, let's motion. So let's, I'm just trying to move the conversation forward here. I think that I would like to motion that we accept the fee for each seasonal resident permit parking for $10 as written. Hold on, wait. Okay, I guess I'm going to remove it from the table and let someone else do this because I don't know how to move forward.
Well, I mean, so there could be an option, going back to what I said, to make the normal resident permit $10, which would make the seasonal permit $5. Thoughts on that? Councillor Sott.
Not being a member of the committee, I like that.
Councillor Gerselo.
And not being a member of the committee, thank you, Chair. I don't agree with that. That's raising the fees that it's raising everybody's fees that we just talked about that you wanted to. If you make the seasonal $10, originally it's $5, so you're raising everybody's fee.
No, what we're talking about right now is the regular year-round resident fee would be $10, the seasonal would be $5.
It's raising the fee. It's usually $5. Now you're raising it to 10. It's regular. Regular isn't.
There is no seasonal.
$5. I know, but the seasonal was going to be half of what a regular was going to be. And if you said it's $10, then you're changing the regular. The regular would be 20.
We're trying to get to a compromise here. There are people here that would like to raise the fees. There are people that would not. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a middle ground, if there's a compromise here. If there isn't.
Half of the regular, so then it would be 20 for regular.
No. Okay. Once again, the year-round resident permit, year-round would be 10. The seasonal resident permit would be 5. It's currently 5. Okay. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. I support the 10 and the 5 for this reason. I think it sends a good message to the residents. I think it's people who have resident parking or will seasonally. And I also feel like it addresses in some way that 82% of the of Salem is supporting this. And I don't remember who said it. It might have been you, Chair. The transportation department and some people from the police department are going to be doing an extraordinary more amount of work, not only getting this program promoted, as we talked about how important it was to reach out to people and everything else, but to process it and to make sure that it is done right. And I think that's fair. We were, confronted with 20 and 10, and I do think that 10 and 5 is reasonable for people to have resident parking. It's just my opinion. So I support, I think it's Councillor Watson-Felt's motion. Okay, well,
Somebody has to make the motion. I
Actually,
can't.
the chair has not made the motion, so let me make that motion. The motion now would be $10. So it will read resident parking permit shall be $10 and shall be valid for a period of 1 year. Through the next one to take up would be first visitor permit parking at $30, fee for second at $50. And then we can take up the seasonal. But it looks, based on this conversation, the motion would be that the seasonal cost would be a $5 pass.
I second.
Any other conversation on this?
So just to clarify, we have not taken up the visitor cost yet.
Right. This is just the resident. Any other conversation on this? Councilor Presnowski.
I just think that we're putting the cart a little bit right now before the horse, only because we may get some more information from the DOR about how we can spend the fees. So until we have that whole package, I think we're making assumptions right now. We're not making it based on all the evidence that we can possibly use. I think Councilor Cohen made a motion earlier to take the fees part of it and make it a separate issue to be talked about at a later date when we get more information. So did that go away? I'm not sure.
That was a motion by Councilor Harvey, and under discussion, and it was not removed, but under discussion, that's a messy way to do it. So if that's the will of the body tonight, then we just pass it with no fee increases. So whatever is existing today moves forward for the year. New increases would come in later when we have more data. That's how that conversation went.
Okay. Not being a member of the committee, I'll
That's your preference.
I'll
is that what you're saying?
defer to the committee.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
Apologies, Mr. Kapantis, you're absolutely correct. No, the Councilor Harvey and I think we're just working through some clarification in our own thinking, and the suggestion that Councilor Harvey was pondering was what Councilor Marcillo just said. I was saying, oh, that's correct, because if we removed the fees from the section, then there would be no fees in the ordinance, and we don't want that. Right. But what we could do is move forward with all the other, I think this is what Councilor Harvey was just starting to get to, I think, in his thinking was we can pass all the other edits with the comment back to the, or not pass, but recommend back to the council that we would recommend for adoption all of the amendments with the exception of the fees section. And then we can, with the intention that we would take up the fee conversation at a later date. That's all that was just happening. And I understand it. And I would move forward at this point in that way if we have to, but I want to make a statement that, so procedurally, does Councilor Harvey need to remove his motion if he so chooses about pulling it out of the amendment, or because it was not seconded, it does not need?
It would need to be seconded.
Okay.
I mean, it's still on the floor. It would need to be seconded. If anyone on the committee would like to second that.
And has not yet been seconded.
It has not yet been seconded.
Okay. Okay,
Would anyone like to second the motion? Can we just get through this?
just procedurally. Okay.
Okay.
Then I would motion to recommend this back to the committee, the committee of the whole, the council, with a positive recommendation for adoption as amended with the exception of the fees section. So no change to the fees section, with the intention of taking up the fee conversation at a later date when we have more information. That's the motion, and then we can discuss it.
See Mr. Kucharski raising his hand. You can come to the microphone. I will also say that what do we intend to do with the partial?
Say again.
The partial permit for the Willows?
It wouldn't pass. I mean, or we could pass it at $5 just in good faith that we could establish it as part of the program.
Mr. Kucharski.
Sorry, that was my question, because we do have some new permits that we've identified. So if we're not taking them up, we don't necessarily know what to then charge people at this point. So.
And you're talking about the partial year?
The partial year, as well as the resident permit, the part-time residents and any landlords. So we don't have that set right now. So just.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We will keep going. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcillo. So for Councilor Watson-Felt's motion to go forward, you would still have to pull back the motion you made about the $10 and $5, which was already seconded.
I will remove that from the table.
Okay. So because you haven't gotten a second yet on your motion, which I would be glad to do, I want to make an amendment, not a friendly amendment, that I want to make an amendment that we accept D, the seasonal paragraph, because that is new to us today. And because there is no seasonal currently, and I'm going to defer to Councilor Jerslow because this affects a lot of what she and Mr. Kucharski said, and we've already accepted in the streets in her ward that are going to be in the blue section. I'm going to move that we accept this paragraph with $5. We'll hear what people think about that, so we can establish the seasonal resident parking. So that's my motion on the table, is to accept what's in front of us, this yellow paragraph, and changing the $10 to $5.
Okay. So what we have is a motion on the table to revert back to the original language in section D. So the price for a resident parking permit is $5. And with that, you get 2 free visitor passes. And we're adding, no? What does it cost right now?
The first visitor pass is $10.
$10 right now.
The
sorry.
second visitor pass
Apologies.
is $20 currently.
10 and 20 currently. Okay. So yeah, please stay there. So then we're adding to that section D, the new language, except the cost of the visitor, of the resident part year.
Seasonal.
Thank you, is $5. And what is the visitor? 10 and 20? 10 and 20. Okay, so there's no difference in the fees charged. It's just a clarification on when it's enforced, I guess is what that paragraph is for. Correct. Okay. Councilor Cohen.
It actually, in the paragraph, says $10 for the seasonal. So
yeah, so we're gonna amend that to 5, right? And we're gonna amend the visitor passes to 10 and 20. So it's the same in both paragraphs. Okay. Yes.
I'd like to further motion that we do include, or at least take up for discussion, these sections around part-time residents and resident landlord. And if we do the math, those are also new, correct?
I don't want to add that to the motion.
Yeah, can we get
I just want to get this passed,
Okay, fine.
because those are discussions that have nothing to do with specific, the people who get the original resident parking pass.
Okay, so the motion on the table from Counselor Watson-Felt, seconded by Counselor Cohen, is Section D, fees. The first two paragraphs that we're looking at, we're changing the price for the resident parking permit to $5, with visitor passes at $10 and $20. In the second paragraph, for the seasonal parking permit, the fee is $5, and the visitor permits are $10 and $20. That was seconded by Counselor Cohen. All those in favor? The motion carries 4-0. Okay, the next section is on, it says the fee for each resident parking permit issued to an individual who resides part-time in the city with vehicles registered elsewhere will be $30. How would we like to handle that? Counselor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. Just a clarification from Mr. Kucharski, Director Kucharski. And you may have already done this. What constitutes part-time?
It's typically someone who owns their home, but they live the majority of the time elsewhere. So their vehicle's registered in another state or outside of the city.
Counselor Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Since I think Councilor Watson felt intent is to take these together, I'm going to bounce to the landlord property owner. I do think that $50 makes sense. I think that we've
It's
had
$30, just to be clear, this is $30. Oh, you jumped down to the next one? Can we just take this one first? Can we just get through this one, the non-resident? Or, yeah.
I'm indifferent about the $30.
Counselor Watson-Felt.
Thank you. I have a motion that we accept this.
Okay, so keep the fee at $30 for each resident parking permit issued to an individual who resides part-time in the city and whose vehicle is registered elsewhere.
Correct.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Counselor Harvey. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay, next paragraph, Counselor Cohen.
Regarding landlord property owner, I expressed this at a previous OLA meeting. I do think the 50 is fair. We had people testify at meetings. Some people emailed us individually that the landlord would come to the property and park in the driveways or whatever, and people who were full-time tenants did not have a place to park, and it puts more burden on them to get resident parking. So I'm going to move that we keep this as is, $50.
Is there a second?
And second.
Seconded by Counselor Watson-Felt. So this is to keep the resident parking permit issued to a non-resident property owner or landlord at $50. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay. College and university students. The next paragraph. This has changes the permit to a $20 fee. It's currently $10. Counselor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Marcello. I fortunately and sometimes unfortunately have a lot of college kids in my ward. And a lot of, as Director Kucharski and Lieutenant Tucker and I have constantly talked about, they do create issues in resident parking areas. Where two apartments all of a sudden have 17 people parking on a street that is resident parking, and it makes it difficult for people who actually reside there. But at the same time, as far as I know, students do not get ability to have visitor parking. So I think it's kind of like they're getting a benefit. And obviously college kids would tend to have visitors who show up spontaneously anyway. So I'm going to defer to other people in the committee in the room on the committee of the whole about whether they think $20 is an appropriate amount, because I think it's $10 now, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm willing to go with the body on this one. I do feel a little conflicted that we may be adding an additional, even though it may be a relatively small burden, but an additional small burden to college kids who are trying to pay rent and probably working multiple jobs and, are trying to go to classes. And I just feel like if we're going to sit here and say we're not impacting residents who are living in resident-only parking zones year-round, then I feel a little bit like we can't really ask that of college kids. They're just trying to do the same thing. I feel very differently about the college student fee than I do about people who do not reside in resident-only zones who are looking to park there freely. So, referring back to the previous two we just took up. I would not like to pass this one, having, I just, those college days are still real close in my memory, and I can't, if we're not doing it for residents, I can't do it for students.
Is that a motion?
A motion to
Keep it at 10?
keep it at 10. Thank you.
Councilor Harvey?
I second that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a motion to keep the student permit at $10, seconded by Councilor Harvey. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes 3-1. Okay. Is that the only fees in the ordinance? Have we gone through all the fees?
That's correct.
Okay, then I will take a motion at this point to accept all of the other changes in here, which are the changes to the new zones. Right, and then all of the streets at the end. Yep, the rest is changing the name of the department. Okay, Councilor Cohen.
I move that we refer to the full council with a positive recommendation. All the changes that were made today included the amendments.
Councilor Cohen moves to refer this back to the committee as amended for first passage, seconded by Councilor Harvey. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay, on to the October parking. Luckily, this is much easier. So in this one, we're looking at just the visitor? The visitor?
That's correct, Madam Chair, but there was a small language amendment that I didn't submit before. I don't know if I need to do that later or if that's something I can share with you now. Sure. So it's the section area highlighted in yellow. This is something I had missed in terms of reflecting the fact that we're not providing physical passes anymore, but rather registering people by their plates. So it had initially read, Resident permit parking streets and all parking shall be prohibited during the hours indicated except by motor vehicles displaying a temporary October resident parking permit. I changed that language to say except by residents that are permitted to register their motor vehicles through the online portal.
So this is just to reflect the fact that it's online and not a hang tag.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It's late. I'm exhausted. Okay. Okay. First, does anyone have any questions on this amendment, which is just clarifying the language? Okay. If I could get a motion to accept this.
Accept this amendment.
Seconded by Councilor Harvey. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay, so then looking up above that, we're looking at the fees. So this is the one, this is free for those in the October zones.
Correct.
And then they have to pay, well, what's proposed here is that visitor permits are $30.
Correct. It currently allows a resident to request one temporary guest permit. We're recommending that if they do want to do that, it would be at a price of $30.
And that's reflective of the proposed change to visitor permits for regular year-round residents, correct?
Correct.
Councilor Harvey?
Thank you, Chair. Is this additional, so say that they already have 2 resident parking passes, is this would be an additional third if they requested it, or is it part of the 2 that they?
This is for streets that are only October parking. So these are streets that year round don't have any resident parking, so they don't have any visitor passes.
All right, so these are streets that become resident parking just during the month of October for.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it's only enforced at night also.
Correct. It's Monday through Friday beginning at 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. and Saturdays and Sundays beginning at noon.
From noon
to 7 a.m.
Okay. Councilor Cohen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce, before this year, no one who had temporary October resident parking got a visitor pass. So this will be an addition.
No, that's not true.
They did before?
They did at no cost. That is correct. When we amended it back in, I think it was 2019.
Did not know that.
That was something that one of the counselors at the time had requested be put in the language.
I apologize for not knowing that, especially since my street has the temporary resident.
I think it's out of line personally. If it's $30 for 1 month when we're keeping the others at 10, I think that's out of line personally, if given the other amendments that we made. Councilor Westenfeld or Councilor Cohen?
Thank you. I will make a motion to amend this to $10 for the visitor pass.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Harvey. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay, and then we need a motion to accept the rest of the red line in here up at the top. Which is just, oop,
Sorry.
well, you may not have the red line version. Sorry, keep going.
So just in section B at the end, we had put in for those that needed passes, in those instances, each issued permit shall cost $2. I had removed that from this version, so I don't know if you need to make that official. I don't know if that was voted on last time.
We're not charging for those.
That's what, that seemed to be what was expressed.
That was the home health care people. Right.
home health care or businesses that might be on these streets.
Oh, right. Okay. So that was
This version has removed it, but
stricken. Okay. So could I get a motion on striking that language? I don't know why I'm getting so much. Counselor Harvey.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to strike the language in regards to the $2 fee for home health aides and any business on the street.
Okay. Second? Counselor Watson-Felt. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Okay. That was it for the edits though, right? So can I get a motion to accept the rest of the text changes? Can you scroll back up to the top, please? Thank you. It's really just the narrative around the program. There we go. It's just registering their vehicles instead of displaying the permit. Counselor Harvey.
I make a motion to accept the changes.
Counselor Harvey moves to accept the other changes, the textual changes, aside from the cost of the permit and, let's see, the language below it on registering and this striking section B, the change there. Seconded by Counselor Cohen. All those in favor?
Sorry, just being really, because I'm just looking at it. So we're not including that at a cost of $30.
That's
Right.
already been changed.
We already did that. Okay, thank you. So it's just the above section in red. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? The matter carries 4-0. Did we do everything? Did we get through all of it?
yes, you did.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here for 3 meetings. Counselor Harvey.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Counselor Harvey moves to adjourn. All those in favor? The matter carries 4-0.